The sun had no mercy that day. It blistered the canyon flats until the dirt curled and the stones cracked, white and bleached like bone. Wind skimmed low, dragging heat like a grudge, scouring whatever the world had left behind. And she was one of those things. Her body had been tossed down the slope like it offended someone just to look at it. Arms scraped, lip bloodied, dress ripped through at the thigh where the sagebrush tore it. She lay half-curled beneath a brittle juniper, limbs tangled like something discarded. Above, the buzzards circled. Not in a hurry, they had time. She stirred. Not much. A flutter in her fingers. The left one twitched toward her ribs. She pressed against the hollow there, where the mirror shard still lay tucked beneath her bodice. Cold and sharp and real. The only thing not taken. Her eyes cracked open to the sun. It punished her for surviving. Her lips moved, no sound. Thirst turned her tongue to burlap. The rope marks on her wrists were deep and cruel. One nail was missing. Her boots had been taken. One earring ripped straight out. Not far from her, a biscuit crust hardened in the dirt. Ants had found it. She watched them crawl. Their silent persistence made something in her chest ache. Hooves. Faint at first, behind the groan of heat and wind. But there. She blinked. Thought the sun was playing tricks. It had done worse before. But the sound came closer. Clipped. Uneven. One step dragged. The horse was lathered in dust. The man on its back sat crooked, broad-shouldered but slumped, like pain had taught him to carry less of himself. His coat was too heavy for the heat, hat low, beard like scrub. His left leg hung strange in the stirrup. A cane was strapped to his saddle, worn smooth from years of being leaned on. He saw her. No pause. No question. He dismounted, stiff, leaning heavy on the cane once his boots hit the ground. His face didn't flinch at the sight of her, though his jaw locked like he'd seen this before, too many times. He moved with the kind of stillness that knows violence but doesn't need to speak of it. He knelt beside her. The vultures above adjusted their arc. She didn't beg. She didn't move. Just stared into him, like trying to memorize this one last face. He took out his knife. Not fast. Not showy. Quiet, almost reverent. Cut the cords from her ankles first, then wrists. The skin peeled in places. He winced for her, though she didn't. From his coat pocket, he pulled a flask wrapped in hide, unscrewed the cap, tilted it slow. A few drops of water met her cracked lips. She coughed. It tasted of tin and smoke. But it was enough. He shrugged off his coat and laid it over her. Rough wool. Still held the shape of his shoulders. She closed her eyes. And then he lifted her, cradled her like someone carrying coals, careful not to burn or spill. She was light, too light, and her limbs hung loose. One hand still clutched at her chest where the mirror shard hid. She didn't let go. He walked, leading the horse with one hand, holding her with the other. His limp worsened with each step, but he said nothing. His breath came out slow, measured, like someone used to hurting. She stirred against him. "Don't take me back," she rasped. It wasn't plea, it was iron. A last will spoken through ash. He didn't look down. Just said, "Ain't where I'm going." And that was all. They moved like a ghost and its burden across the desert floor. She felt the world roll beneath his steps, the weight of his gait compensating for a leg that didn't work right anymore. The saddle creaked softly. His coat warmed her like a hearth, not gentle, but steady. The vultures did not follow. Their meal had been stolen. Behind them, dust rose in slow coils, swallowing the drag marks of his boots and the groove his cane left in the sand. Hours passed in pieces. She slept in fits, dreamless, breath shallow. When she woke, he had set her on a fallen log beneath the shade of a rock outcrop. A stream nearby burbled faintly, nearly dry. The last of its water glinted between stones. He wasn't far. Gathering kindling. One of his shoulders was stiff, an old injury that hadn't healed right. She watched how he moved through pain like it was an old song stuck in his bones. Her eyes dropped to the satchel at his hip. Stitched along the flap was a faded patch of leather, embroidered once by a child's hand. It had a crooked horse and a name worn unreadable. He noticed her gaze and turned back to his task. Said nothing. She reached under the coat, touching the mirror shard. She had once used it to check for blood on her teeth, to pin her hair right. Now it was the last unbroken thing she owned. He brought her water from the stream in a dented tin cup. Didn't hand it to her, just set it beside her boots, careful. Waited a few feet off. Gave her silence. She drank. It hurt, but it helped. She looked at him again. His face was wind-cut, lined. Eyes dark, but not cold. She studied the way he kept glancing at the sky, measuring time by shadows. Not in a hurry, but alert. The kind of man who didn't trust stillness too long. "What's your name?" she asked, voice barely there. He rubbed his jaw, shrugged. "Been called worse than most names." She gave a short, bitter smile. "I've been called worse than no name." The stream kept whispering. He took that as answer enough. They moved on before the heat peaked. He let her ride the horse. He walked. That limp of his deepened, made the cane sing against rock. She watched from above, guilt pooling in her stomach. Not guilt for being rescued, guilt for being helpless. She hated that more than she could say. Ahead, the land shifted. Ridges of basalt and ash. The trail narrowed. They passed a burned-down fence, its posts blackened and half gone. Crows picked through the dry grass. One of them held a bit of blue ribbon in its beak. It fluttered like something lost from a child's hair. She turned her face from the bird, tucked her bare feet tighter against the saddle. Later, they crossed paths with a rider in white, a preacher mounted tall, robes clean. He looked down on her with a gaze like winter, made the sign of the cross, spit into the dirt. "Unclean thing," he muttered. The man beside her didn't raise his voice, just stopped walking, turned his head, slow. The look he gave the preacher was the kind that made men reconsider judgment. The preacher moved on. Her pulse didn't slow for a while. When night fell, they camped beside a half-fallen barn with only one wall standing. He built a fire in the shelter of a crooked doorframe. She sat on the opposite side, arms around her knees. He passed her half a biscuit. Said, "Ain't much." She took it, tore it in two, gave half back. For the first time, his mouth curled slightly. Not a smile, just the beginning of one. It was enough. The stars came out sharp. The coyotes called. He lay with his hat over his eyes. She sat upright, watching shadows move. Her fingers never left the shard of mirror tucked in her blouse. She didn't ask why he'd stopped for her. He didn't offer. Some things grow truer in silence. By morning, the buzzards were long behind them. And though her feet were still bare and the pain still lived in her bones, she rose first. Stood tall. Looked toward the canyon ahead like it owed her something. He woke to find her waiting beside the horse, coat wrapped firm around her shoulders, hair tangled and wild but her spine unbent. He limped over, eyes scanning the hills. She didn't need to ask if they were being followed. She saw it in the set of his jaw. "What now?" she asked. He looked down the trail, then back at her. There was something measured in his voice when he said, "Now we keep moving." She nodded once, mounted the horse herself this time. He steadied her leg without speaking. His hands were rough but careful. She didn't flinch. As they set off again, side by side, the wind picked up, cooler now. The sun was still cruel, but it had a shadow trailing it. And for the first time since she'd been left, the birds above weren't circling. They were just flying. The trail that followed the canyon wall was barely a path at all. Just a line worn by mule hooves and regret, winding between broken rocks and pine stubble. There were no signs, only instinct and the shape of the land. It was the kind of road taken by men who didn't want to be found, and women who had already been. She rode the horse now, though not easily. Her legs ached from the days before, and the raw skin at her ankles split with every shift in saddle. Still, she sat upright, her jaw set, her grip on the rein steady. She didn't ask for help. He didn't offer unless it was needed. He walked beside her, one hand on the reins, the other resting on the worn head of his cane. Each step of his bad leg dragged like a memory, refusing to let go. He never spoke of it, never leaned on her for pity. His silence wasn't cold, it was careful. A kind of reverence, as if he believed words had weight and shouldn't be wasted. She studied him when he didn't notice. The way his eyes moved before his body did. Always scanning, always choosing the ground that would hurt him least. She watched the creases in his coat shift with his steps, the fabric stained with dust and use. There was a scar on the back of his hand, white and shaped like a horseshoe. Old. He flexed his fingers, sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking. The trail turned sharp along a ridge. Below, the land spread wide, red cliffs bleeding into gold. A hawk soared above. Neither of them spoke. They passed a split-rail fence, half swallowed by earth. An old sign leaned into the wind, its letters long gone. Beyond it, a cemetery forgotten by time. Just a scattering of wooden markers, most unmarked, one still upright. She read the name, but didn't speak it. "I wonder if they died quiet," she said, not turning. He didn't answer. Just took off his hat and kept walking. That was enough. Midday heat made the air shimmer. Flies gathered. She pushed them away from her face with the sleeve of his coat. He noticed, untied a worn kerchief from his neck, and handed it to her without a word. She hesitated, then took it. It smelled of pine smoke and sun. A caravan approached from the east, 3 wagons, 2 riders, a preacher at the lead. His hat was high, and his robe stark white, even out here. He sat proud on a tall horse, his eyes sharp beneath silver brows. They passed slow. The preacher looked at her first, then at him. His face hardened. "Careful where you ride," the preacher said. "Some souls stain whatever they touch." The man didn't reply. His pace didn't falter. "You can't cleanse a thing like her," the preacher added. Still no reply. But after a few steps, the man turned back, looked the preacher dead in the eye, didn't raise his voice. "Then don't touch her." The preacher's mouth opened, then closed. He flicked his reins, riding on. She exhaled. Her grip on the reins had tightened so much her knuckles were white. The man walked beside her like nothing had happened. "You didn't have to say anything," she murmured. Didn't say much. She looked away, not out of shame, but something more dangerous. Gratitude. A thing she wasn't used to owing. They camped early that evening beneath a pine that looked struck by lightning. It leaned like it wanted to fall, but hadn't made up its mind. He built the fire low, careful not to spark the dry grass. She sat across from him, rubbing her sore wrists, then reached into her bodice and drew out the mirror shard. He watched her do it, not startled, just curious. She held it up, letting the firelight glance off its edges. "It used to be part of a set," she said. "Had a little comb and everything." "Someone give it to you?" "My sister. Before she stopped being my sister." He nodded once, slow. "Still keep it. Only thing left that wasn't touched." He poked at the fire with a stick. The embers whispered back. "Sometimes the things that survive ain't what you'd expect," he said. She turned the mirror in her hand. It caught her reflection, crooked, smudged, unfamiliar. "You got anything like that?" she asked. He looked toward his saddle, walked stiffly to it, pulled something from the pouch, and sat back down beside the fire. It was a button, hand-carved from wood, the edges uneven, smoothed by time and fingers. He didn't speak, just placed it in her palm. She studied it. "From a coat. From a boy." She said nothing, but her fingers closed around it like it meant something sacred. Later, when he dozed with his back to a stump and his hat pulled low, she sewed the button into the inner pocket of his coat. She found an old needle in her bag, miraculously not stolen, and a bit of thread from her hem. Her fingers bled from the effort, but she did it anyway. He didn't wake. By morning, the air had cooled. A mist clung to the ground like memory. She stepped out first, brushing dust from her dress. He followed, slower, his limp sharper from sleeping wrong. But he didn't complain. Never did. They crossed a stream with stepping stones, half submerged. She offered her hand without thinking. He took it, but gently, like touching her meant something he wasn't ready to name. She let go once they reached the other side. The road narrowed into switchbacks. Steep. He tied the horse's reins around his wrist and helped guide it while she walked behind, breath short from altitude. They stopped for water beside a ruined homestead. 3 walls standing, roof caved in. A child's wooden gun lay in the dirt near the threshold. She bent down, brushed dirt from it. The handle was carved with initials. She didn't read them aloud. He stood beside her. His face was stone, but something behind his eyes cracked. "This was yours." He nodded. "Your family." He said nothing. She placed the gloves he'd lent her on the toy gun. A gesture. Not pity, something else. Like honoring the bones of something sacred. He didn't speak the rest of the day. She didn't push. Some silences aren't meant to be filled. That night, they found an old watchtower built into the cliffside. Just a single room, open to the stars. Inside, she lit a stub of candle from her old pack. He sat against the wall, knees drawn up, coat around his shoulders. She knelt beside him, opened his coat, pointed to the button she'd sewn back into place. "You keep this. I try not to throw away the good things." They didn't touch, but the distance between them felt smaller, somehow. When she lay down, she placed the mirror shard beside her head, facing the wall. He watched the way it caught the candlelight, then dimmed as the flame went out. In the dark, her voice reached him. "Why'd you stop for me?" He answered without hesitation. "Because you were still alive. And if I hadn't been," he paused, "I would have buried you." She didn't reply. But for the first time, sleep found her without shaking hands. When dawn came, the mule path rose toward a high ledge that overlooked miles of untamed country. She stopped to breathe it in. Hills stitched with pines. Shadows of buffalo in the distance. The world was bigger than her pain. He stepped beside her, cane planted firm in the dust. "Where are we headed?" she asked. He glanced at the horizon. "Away. A waste, not a place." "No," he said. "But it's a start." She turned toward him. The wind pulled at her hair, lifted the edge of his coat. "You don't talk much." He met her eyes. "Neither do you." They stared a beat longer than needed. She nodded once, then turned back to the trail. The sun climbed. The mist burned off. The mule path bent west, deeper into land untamed by law or cruelty. And as they followed it side by side, the woman no longer looked over her shoulder. She didn't need to. The vultures weren't circling anymore. The air changed as they descended into the gulch. A hush fell over everything, like even the wind didn't want to be heard. Pines closed in, taller now, thick enough to cast shadows that cooled the trail and cloaked the quiet in something ancient. The woman breathed deeper. Pine needles crunched beneath the horse's slow hooves. She no longer winced with each step. He walked ahead, favoring the left leg more than usual, his cane tapping a beat against the rock. His coat, now refitted with the sewn button, hung heavier with each mile. He didn't complain. He never did. They found the station mid-afternoon, a way stop built from stone and hand-hewn timber, abandoned and near falling, tucked in the crook of 2 hills. A crumpled bell hung over the old door. One shutter flapped like a broken jaw, but it stood, and it had a fireplace. He tied the horse under the lean-to. She stepped through the doorway, brushing cobwebs with her sleeve. Dust bloomed around her. She coughed once, then again. He brought in dry wood without asking, laid it careful, lit the fire with flint and silence. The warmth moved slow through the room, like honey across a plate. She settled on a low bench beside the hearth, pulled the mirror shard from her bodice, and placed it beside her on the stone. For a long time, neither of them spoke. He boiled water in a dented tin. From his coat pocket, he pulled the last of a biscuit, stale, crumbled, wrapped in cloth like it meant something. He didn't hand it to her, just placed it between them. She broke it in half, dipped one side in the steaming water, and chewed. The flavor was dust and ash and something faintly sweet. She ate like it was communion. "You ever think about stopping?" she asked. He stirred the cup slowly. "Stopped once." "What happened?" "Woke up." She stared into the fire. "I think I used to talk too much. That's what they told me, anyway. Mouth like a whip, woman like a trap." She gave a humorless smile. "Funny how quick people call you sharp until you cut the wrong person." He didn't flinch. "Sharp ain't a sin." "No," she said softly, "but it makes you hard to keep." Silence stretched. He removed his coat, folded it once, and placed it beside the hearth. The fire painted long shadows behind him, softening the edges of his limp, the scar that ran from his collarbone to his shoulder. Her eyes dropped to his leg. "You never told me what happened. You never asked." "I'm asking now." He looked into the flames. "Horse fell. Took me with it. 2 years to learn to walk again. 3 to stop hating the horse." "You still got him?" "No. He was smart enough to die." She exhaled through her nose. Something close to a laugh. The fire popped. Embers rose like fireflies, trying to escape. He stood, stepped to the window. His shoulders tightened. "What is it?" He raised a finger, waited, then nodded toward the lean-to. Outside, 2 horses stood tethered. New, polished tack, saddlebags full, and 2 men stepping down, guns easy at their sides. She tensed. He moved back from the window. The door creaked open slow. The firelight caught them both, dusty boots, sun-creased faces, teeth yellow with chew. "Evenin'," one said. "Didn't expect company." The man said nothing. He stayed still, left hand on the cane, right one loose at his side. "You got a woman with you?" the second man asked, scanning the shadows. "Gotta lookin' for someone." The woman stood from the bench. Not hidden, framed by fire. Her chin lifted. "Then look." The men exchanged glances. "She's the one," the first said. "That's her. Hair's shorter now, but it's her." The second nodded. He said if she's found, bring her back. Alive or not. He took a step forward. The cane made a sharp sound as it planted. The man had moved, only slightly. But there was weight in it. Something coiled. "Don't," he said. Not loud. Not threatening. Just certain. The second man smirked. "You gonna stop me with that stick?" The cane twisted. The man's right hand moved once. The barrel of a hidden rifle swung up from the hollow core of the cane. The smirk vanished. "Step back," the man said. The bounty hunter stepped. Backward. The fire hissed. "No coin's worth this," the first one muttered. The second lingered. "He'll send more. Let him." They left. The hoofbeats faded, lost in the trees. The woman stood frozen for a moment, staring at the door. Then she turned to him. "You didn't even aim." "Didn't have to." She stepped closer. Her fingers brushed the edge of the coat. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." She watched him put the rifle back in the cane, snap it shut. The action was smooth, practiced. She sat back beside the fire, picked up the remaining piece of biscuit and broke it in half, handed it to him. This time he took it. They ate in silence. Later, when the flames had gone low, she picked up the mirror shard and turned it in her hands. Her reflection stared back, blurred, smeared with ash and firelight. "I used to fix my hair with this." "You still could." She gave a short breath. "What's the point?" He looked at her. Not like a man who wanted something. Like a man who saw something he respected. "You're not broken," he said. She didn't answer. Just wrapped the mirror in cloth and tucked it away again. Outside, the moon rose soft and wide. It cast the station in silver, made every shadow a story. She lay curled near the fire, his coat over her. He sat with his back to the door, rifle beside him. "You think they'll come back?" she asked in the dark. "Yes." "And you'll fight?" "If I have to." She turned to face him. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "Because you're not a thing to be returned." The fire crackled once, like it agreed. By morning, they were moving again. The path west was rough, the earth clawed with old wagon ruts. The horse stepped carefully. She walked beside it this time, bare feet wrapped in strips of cloth he'd cut from his shirt. They passed a tree with a nail in it. No sign left, just the hole where something had once been posted. She ran her finger over it. "Someone was wanted here," she said. "Or lost." The land began to rise again, slow and steady. Her breath grew shallower, but she didn't ask to stop. When they reached the ridge, the wind picked up. It carried the smell of smoke, pine, char, memory. They found the remnants of another fire. Not theirs. Not recent. Still smoldering. The man knelt, pressed a palm to the ash. 4 men. 1 woman. 2 horses. 1 wagon. "You sure?" He stood, Sure enough, she scanned the horizon. They're still close. Closer than I'd like. They moved faster after that. At dusk, they found a deer trail that veered off the main path, hidden by thicket. He led her through it, using the cane like a blade to push the brush aside. By nightfall, they reached a clearing, high enough to see the stars, low enough to hide in shadow. She laid out a small circle of stones. Built the fire herself this time. He watched. You ever think about building something? She asked. He raised a brow. A place, she clarified. Somewhere quiet, where no one spits when they see you. I did once. What stopped you? He looked at his leg, then at her. Didn't want to build it alone. She met his eyes. Her throat moved. They didn't speak the rest of the night. But when she lay down, she did so close enough that the tips of their fingers almost touched. And for the first time, she didn't check the mirror before sleep. The firelight danced on their joined silence, casting long shapes across the rocks, shapes that looked almost like a home, waiting to be built. The canyon narrowed until the sky was no more than a blue ribbon above their heads. The trail wound tight through rock and ash, switchbacks slick with gravel, the air tinged with iron. Trees gave way to scrub, and the wind tasted of snow waiting just beyond the horizon. He didn't say much, but she could feel something shift in him. Not fear, readiness. The same way a man tightens his boots before a long climb. She watched him more closely now. Noticed how he tested each step before planting his foot, how he touched the bark of trees and tasted wind like someone reading a language she hadn't learned yet. When they came upon the cabin, it rose like a secret. Built into the rock itself, low-roofed and narrow, patched with rusted wire and salvage tin. A slanted chimney whispered smoke into the dusk, barely visible. He paused when it came into view. This it? She asked. He nodded once. What's left of it? The horse groaned as they approached. He untied the reins and led it around the side, where an old trough sat dry and split. She walked to the door. The handle had no lock, just a twisted horseshoe nailed into the wood. It creaked open with a sigh. Inside, the air smelled of old pine, wool, and the long breath of a place that hadn't been spoken to in a while. There were no luxuries, just what a man could carry, fix, or trade for. A stove, a cot, a crate for a table, a length of rope coiled like a serpent on the windowsill, nails hammered straight for reuse. She ran her hand along the mantel. Dust scattered. A single cup sat there, glazed with a faint blue line. She picked it up, turned it over in her hand. It was chipped, but intact. Like her. He stepped in behind her, set down his satchel, removed his coat, hung it on a bent nail near the door. She watched him limp across the room and lower himself into the lone chair with the heaviness of someone who knew what it cost. She sat on the floor by the hearth, unwrapped the mirror shard, placed it gently beside her. You ever fix this place up? She asked. He shook his head. Every time I did, someone came along and broke it again. She scanned the room. Wire patches on the wall. A board wedged where a window had shattered. A drawer tied shut with twine. You tried anyway. He shrugged. Didn't know how not to. That night, she cooked from what little they had. Beans. Stale bread softened in boiled water. He didn't praise her cooking, but he scraped his bowl clean. When he stood to clean the tin, he winced, his legs stiff from a cold. She took the bowl from him, without speaking, and wiped it out with the tail of her dress. Afterward, she searched the cabin, found a needle in a tin under the cot, thread tucked inside an old matchbook. She retrieved his coat from the nail and laid it across her lap. What are you doing? He asked. Fixing what I can. She started with the frayed seam beneath the shoulder. Her fingers worked slowly, tugging the thread with a kind of reverence. She didn't rush. The quiet between them grew deep, not empty. You were married, she said. His eyes didn't shift. Yes. Here. He nodded. Before the limp. She finished the shoulder, moved to the sleeve. What happened? They stayed behind one day while I went hunting. By the time I came back, the barn was burning. She stopped sewing. Waited. He didn't elaborate. Fire takes everything too fast, she whispered. Some things it leaves behind, he said, eyes on his leg. and those burned slower. She reached into the inner pocket, where she'd sewn the wooden button, pulled it out, and set it on the table between them. He stared at it like it was a photograph. She was a girl, she asked. Small. Laughed too loud. Named every chicken. He didn't reach for the button. Just looked. She placed it in the bowl, careful, like it deserved to be held. The fire burned low. The room softened. And for a moment, neither of them was alone with their pain. When morning came, snow dusted the hills. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in his coat, eyes scanning the tree-line. The world felt quieter, more fragile. He limped out beside her, his breath left in clouds. He looked toward the trail like it owed him something. She touched the side of the doorframe. A carved mark there, faint, almost forgotten. You made this, she asked. He nodded. Kept track of days once. You still do. No point. She turned to him. Maybe there is. That afternoon, they built a second chair together. Took wood from a broken fence, wired it tight at the joints. She held the pieces while he hammered. His movements were slower than they used to be, but sure. When it was done, she sat in it, testing its weight. It didn't rock. It held. Not bad, she said. He gave a short smile. First thing built here in 5 years. That night, while she swept the floor with a bundle of brush, a knock sounded at the door. 1. Then 2. They froze. He moved first. Retrieved the cane rifle from beside the cot. Clicked it open. She crouched by the fire, fingers wrapped around the mirror shard. The door creaked open on its own weight. A man stood silhouetted in the snow, flanked by 2 others. Their coats were finer, their guns polished. And in the center, clean boots, pressed trousers, slicked hair, stood the one who called himself husband. His smile was too smooth. Evening, he said. Come to take what's mine. The man didn't answer. Neither did she. Got papers, the husband added, waving a folded sheet. Got gold, too. More than this broken bastard can offer. Still silence. I can make it easy, he said. Or we can burn it all down again. The man raised his cane. Steady. You won't walk out, he said. The husband laughed. You barely walk in. The cane cocked. The 2 other men reached for their guns. She moved first. She hurled the mirror shard. It caught the firelight as it spun, silver, sharp, true. It struck the man on the left, slicing across his face. He screamed, fell back. The second man turned toward her. Too slow. The cane barked. 1 shot. Straight through the chest. He dropped. The husband froze. Not smiling now. She stepped forward, rifle from the wall in her hands. Her voice was low. You can leave, or we'll leave you to the snow. The husband's hand trembled. He dropped the paper. It drifted to the floor like ash. He turned. Walked into the trees. Didn't look back. The door slammed in the wind. She stood for a long time, breathing hard. The mirror shard lay cracked on the floor. Blood shimmered along its edge. He limped to her side. Laid his hand on her shoulder. You all right? No, she said. But I'm here. They burned the paper in the fire. It curled and blackened, unreadable by the time it hit the coals. Outside, snow fell slow and soft. She gathered the pieces of the mirror, wrapped them in cloth, then placed them in a tin and sealed it shut. He sat in the new chair, watched her move around the cabin, placing things where she wanted. She straightened the picture frame, folded the blanket, lit a second candle. You staying? He asked. She turned, nodded once. Yes. That night, when she slept, her feet were warm. The fire stayed lit, and the wire in the walls didn't creak. The cabin didn't feel like hiding anymore. It felt like something being built.